Alrighty, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spotlight. Today is my honor to introduce Susan Lammers, who is my substitute hall director until we find a new one. But she's actually doubling after working in residence life for 22 years, which is crazy.
Yes.
And then becoming the associate director of residence life in DOR. She's dual timing, being my basically mentor while also having, the big job on campus. But go ahead and introduce yourself and just what's important. What do you want viewers to know about you before, we start getting into it?
Oh, wow. Well, so like Elijah said, my name's Susan Lammers. I'm one of the associate directors of residence life here at Iowa State University. I actually have two colleagues that also serve as associate directors, and we each kind of have a different area of expertise. But overall, my job on campus is, just to help students feel comfortable and welcome in their Cyclone home and everything that goes along with that. Like Elijah said, I have been working in residence life for over 20 years now. Never, ever believed that this is what my career would be. Elijah may get into it. I was never supposed to come to Iowa State to begin with, and so my family thinks it's hysterical now that I've been here as long as I have, but have done multiple jobs and multiple roles, and just love it. It's a privilege to work with students in on-campus housing. I love Iowa State. I love Ames, and that's probably good to get us started.
Yeah, so you said that you kind of split expertise between three different people. What would you say, what are the three areas of expertise, and then what would you say your specialty is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my area is student leadership and development. So I work a lot with our administrative processes, helping to oversee our hall desk operations. And, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that people may not realize when we get ready for 9,000 students to move to campus. Students show up on Tuesday, but there's a whole backlog of stuff that has to happen before they get here to make that happen, because you're essentially moving in a big city in 2 days. So I help with kind of all the back end to get folks here and have that be a good experience. I help a lot with our tours and recruitment process in conjunction with our marketing office, our professional staff training group. There's a July training that happens every year with our professional staff to get them ready and prepared, and so I advise that group. And then I help supervise our coordinators of residence life, who supervise the hall directors that actually live in and supervise the resident assistants like yourself in the building. So. And then, of course, other duties as assigned, just like any job you're going to have. One of my colleagues specifically works with behavior and conduct and safety and helping to oversee that process. There's a back end to all of that, too. And then I have another one that works with programming and some of our academic services piece, learning communities, and that sort of thing. And then they advise different committees that we have within residence life as well.
Okay, so you're more of kind of the team building aspect and the leadership. In the title, it's kind of building an operation, where they're more of kind of the other random events that are going to happen, conduct and...
Yeah, and they also supervise coordinators of residence life that then in turn supervise hall directors, apartment directors, like I mentioned. So we have some areas of expertise that cross over, and we all, supervise and oversee our professional staff. But then, we each have these little pockets that we grab onto and take care of in order to keep our operation moving forward as it should.
So what, in a day's work, what would you say that you do, I guess last week, as just kind of a normal week in the year? What do you find yourself doing in the day?
So it's funny that you asked that, because one of the things I love about residence life is literally no 2 days are the same. It's the kind of job that I come in and I think, here's the 5 meetings I have, the 3 things I'm going to get done, and then half the time the day never ends up like that. Which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to in their work. But the thing with residence life is you might come in and we are a 365-day operation 24/7. Our students live with us. They come home from class and then they're in our spaces. So maybe something happened the night before that we have to follow up on, or there's a new student experiencing some kind of crisis or need in their life that we, have to follow up on. So those are the things that sometimes intervene in the day that you think, oh, I'm going to get these things done, but then your attention has to go to that student. But to your question, like last week, I am doing double duty right now. So I have one-on-ones with resident and assistant staff. The committee I advise had a meeting, so I met with them for an hour to start to get some things in line for July training. I process some conduct cases. I read, incident reports of things that happen on campus and assign those out to the hall director staff. There's usually facilities issues to follow up on, informal conversations with our facility staff about where the bulletin board's going and is the mural going to go there, and somebody's toilet doesn't work. I mean, to be totally frank with you.
It's probably most of the issues, honestly.
Right. So those are, and then getting students ready for break. Again, students don't just leave here. There's some back-end process that, we let students know, close your windows, take home your food, and, things to get ready for that. And then, believe it or not, I was working on a document and shared it out with my colleagues to get us ready for spring closing in May.
Oh, you already started doing that?
Yeah, believe it or not.
You guys really do. There's a lot of backlog that seems to go into that. And I'd imagine, I've never heard that comparison of like moving in a city, because it is like 9,000 people living on campus.
Yeah.
Like that's 5 times the amount of my hometown.
Exactly.
So,
We speak of that a lot, Elijah. Yeah, we move in more students in some small towns in Iowa, and then we have to move them all out.
And for each break, too.
Yes.
So you have to do it like 4 times a year. So it is, I mean, I never thought about it being that big of a process, but it definitely makes sense to consider it like overseeing like that kind of work.
Right.
Yeah. So, so we kind of discussed what you do in a daily life, but I kind of want to go into like the history of you working here. So I guess we'll start like, how did you get into this position, and then like, what is your journey through residence life, and how'd you get here?
That's like a long road of history, but I'll try to like encapsulate it in a nutshell. I grew up in a couple different places. My dad was an industrial engineer for a meatpacking plant. And in the 80s, when I grew up, that was kind of an unstable industry. So we ended up moving around a lot. But anyways, landed in Albert Lea, Minnesota. And that's where my brother and I really consider home. I mean, that's where we grew up for the most part. We both graduated from high school there. My brother's about 3 years older than me. He came to Iowa State on an engineering degree. And, at that time, well, I guess it's still true now, Iowa and Minnesota don't have reciprocity. So my parents were paying out-of-state tuition because it wasn't a full ride scholarship for my brother to come to Iowa State. And I came to visit him, and I loved Iowa State. I don't know what it was, but I just fell in love with it. And so fast forward 3 years, it's time for me to graduate from high school. Almost, and I really wanted to come to Iowa State, but I knew I was going to get an education degree, maybe social work, something in the social sciences. My brother's the math science guy in the family. I'm the social science person, and my dad said, "I'm not paying out-of-state tuition for you to get an education degree. There's a lot of good state schools in Minnesota. Find one here." And that was fine. All my friends were going to the state schools in Minnesota. I applied to Winona State University, got accepted. My friends were going there. Great. And then my senior year of high school, my dad got a really good job offer in Iowa. And so my parents moved back to Iowa. I finished my senior year living with some really close family friends. And my dad said, "I'm not paying out-of-state tuition for you to get an education degree. Find a school in Iowa."
Oh, how the tables have turned.
It did turn. And we laugh about that. So, of course, I loved Iowa State. And the other funny part of the story is, at that point, I had decided to get a degree in family and consumer sciences, what used to be home economics. And given the long history of home economics at this land-grant institution, at that point, because my brother was an engineering student, that's all I knew of Iowa State was engineering. Mm-hmm. And so I called him and I said, "Do they have this major there?" And my brother's like, "Oh my God, Susan. There's a building in the middle of campus that says home economics on it." I'm like, "Well, you've never taken me there. It's always been the engineering side." So anyways, I did end up coming to Iowa State. I got a family and consumer sciences degree. My sophomore year, I became a resident assistant. So that's where it all that whole backstory to tell you.
That's what hooked you in.
That's what hooked me in. The irony of that story, I applied 3 times and didn't get hired. And I was like, well, I'm done with residence life. I thought that would be cool. Clearly, it is not for me because I applied 3 times and didn't get hired. And on the 3rd time that I applied, I was on the alternate list, and it was December. It was finals week. It was Wednesday of finals week. And a hall director across campus called and said, I want to talk to you about this position. And then ended up like hiring me 2 days before finals, and I started in January.
And now you're hiring people that are hiring the art.
Correct.
I mean, you climbed all the way up the food chain,
Yes.
and now you're here.
Yeah. So then I was an RA. I loved it. I was a residence life tour guide. But then I got this degree in family and consumer sciences, and I really wanted to go teach. So I did go do that for 2 years. And then the opportunity came to come back to Iowa State to grad school. And at the time, I was going to go to grad school part-time, but I was making so little money teaching, unfortunately, that I could pretty much come back as a grad school student and pretty much make almost, like, not the same, but it wasn't too
Like you might as well.
Right,
Yeah.
and finish it in 2 years. So then I came back on an assistantship in the Department of Residence. I was a hall desk supervisor. And then I was going to leave. I got my degree in counselor education, but a full-time hall director position came open, again, at the very last minute. I think I was hired in June. The position started in July. Yeah. So I spent 2 years in Larch Hall, and then I was going to leave. And then we reopened Buchanan Hall. And I thought that was a good opportunity. I had some great mentors that said you would be great at this. So I went over to Buchanan for 2 years. Then I was going to leave. And then the position came open at Schletter University Village, which was a lot of our family housing. At the time, it was transitioning to being a single student housing. So I thought, hey, I'll try that out. That's something I've never done. And I just ended up falling in love with that. I was there for many years. I had a colleague at Frederickson Court that ended up retiring. I took that on. We leased some properties out in West Ames. That was different and new. I took that on, eventually became a coordinator. And then in 2020, we did some restructuring, and the associate director position came up, and I was fortunate that there was one that was built, and I was selected for, and so that was great. So yeah, that's kind of like the long...
Hey, it's like the guidance. The world was showing you, like, this is your time to shine.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Every door just kept opening for you.
Yeah.
So after you got your undergraduate degree, how many years of working in residence life before you were like, okay, fine, I'm doing it. I'm in it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think once I started at Schletter University Village and it became longer than a 2-year deal, I finally quit with the 2-year thing. I'm like, I'm just going to let this ride and see where it goes.
See how long I can do.
Yeah, and to your point, it's really interesting how in my journey, every time I got to a point where I'm like, okay, it's something new, a new opportunity presented itself here, And so that's something that, like, I try to speak to people about, I've been here 20 years, but I have never done the same thing for 20 years.
And you've kept, like, moving positions and getting every aspect of campus, which is really awesome.
Yeah,
that's true experience.
Right.
Because if you just worked as your position now for 22 years,
I wouldn't be.
You probably wouldn't know like as much as you do about like students and like the actual residence life and like everything like that. So.
And that doesn't even count throwing in the years that we did COVID. That was like a whole different, we did isolation quarantine housing. And so again, even though the circumstances of that were not the best with the pandemic, it was just something totally new to use my skills towards. So
it was a good challenge.
Right.
It was a really good challenge.
Exactly.
For being on campus during that time. I could not imagine. So I kind of want to talk about during this whole process of doing this, what have been some of your goals? Like what have been some of the things that you've worked on? Do you have any projects or like, I really want to know like what are you trying to push for on campus life?
Yeah. Well, this isn't a recent project, but one that I'm super proud of is when I was a hall director, I was actually the hall director that came up with the whole concept of the move-in crew. That was kind of my baby.
Wow.
Yeah. That was the result of, we had a move-in before the move-in crew and, there were cars wrapped around and all this stuff happening. And after moving, my supervisor came down to my office and said, we got to do something about this. So I did a little research and you and I had a really great move-in crew program. And this tells you how old I am. I don't remember if I wrote them a letter or an email, but they sent me a packet of information about their move, like in the mail. Like now you would just email that stuff, but back then they like mailed it to me. So like I'm super proud of that project, even though that was many moons ago, but it's just
it's such a big part of moving.
Right.
You can't even say moving without thinking about like the organization of, okay, park here, move your car 30, like that whole, it's a huge undertaking. It's such an awesome part of moving.
Yeah. And so I think what I'm most proud about that is, one, it just made our move-in process so much more like customer service friendly, because the students and the families are our customers, and that when I was done with it, it was built in a way that someone else could pick up the baton and run with it.
And keep going. So it's something, it's going to last for a while, like having this move. It's also such a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so essential to moving in.
Yeah.
Especially since Iowa State's bigger than you and I.
Yes.
Like, we need that function, because the moving crew is awesome.
Yeah. I'm so proud of it. I mean, seriously, that's one of the things I've done in the Department of Residence that I'm so incredibly proud of. When I started out at Schletter University Village, we had just built a community center out there. And there's a playground that you can see when you pass Stang, and we did a community build on the playground. And so bringing the students and the families together around that. The off-campus properties we leased, we staffed those with residence life staff, resident assistants, apartment directors, and those apartments weren't built for community in the same way, but the way that staff shepherded that along and found ways to connect with students. They had tables outside of bus stops in West Ames, and they were handing out granola bars and, study tips, they made YouTube videos of themselves and sent it out to residents, So I guess when I think of projects, it's stuff that it has enhanced the student experience on campus that I think really sets us apart, So those are the things that I get excited and proud of and jazzed about.
So are you presented with a problem and then they're like, hey, Susan, try to figure out a solution to this one? Or is it more like you see something on campus and you're like, I want to do something about this? Or is it kind of a mix of both?
I think it's really a mix of both. Some things are just presented to you, like a supervisor coming down and saying, we got to do something about this. Do you have any ideas? And then I think sometimes, it's just things that you stumble upon that you're like, wow, there's a way that we can do this better or make this better for students. And I want to be clear too, I don't operate in a vacuum. I've got great colleagues, great partners, both internally and externally. And I think it's so important to have those relationships because nobody gets it done by themselves. When I think about the move-in crew, just as an example, it's like that can't just be a residence life thing. That can't just be a Susan thing, because you've got facilities that have staff out there directing traffic. You got to work with the parking division to close off roads and the traffic pattern and all of that. You have to have.
Someone's got to hire all the student workers. And pay them. And,
right. So it's like all of that. And so I think when presented with things like that, you just have to have really good relationships to be able to, to get things done.
Well, it's still really cool though that you are a part of the process of building that. That's all these other events, and I'm pretty unfamiliar with a lot of the other residence halls, especially BWR. I've walked through it a million times, but I did not know the name of any of the buildings there. So so it's really nice to hear about kind of these other processes that go around campus that I'm just not a part of.
Right.
It's super awesome.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the staff that you work with and the people involved on campus, what would you say you are kind of known for? What if I were to ask tell me about Susan?
Oh,
what I mean? What would they most likely say about you as far as your career goes?
Yeah. This is a hard question for me because I'm not somebody that I tend to just try to be a pretty humble person, so thinking about what other people might say about me. It like feels a little weird. But one of my former supervisors used to describe me, and she used to say, Susan's really a utility player on our staff, which means that I think, my career in the Department of Residence, I've done a lot of different little things. And so I have all these, given my history and the fact that I've been and worked in all these different communities, I feel like I know a little bit about a lot of different things, And so I think sometimes people will see me as the one that they'll come to and they'll be like, you may not know the answer to this, Susan, but do you know where we can go to get the answer? And that I really like, whether it's with my colleagues or with students. So I may not be able to say to them, oh, I'm the expert in, how we do X, Y, Z. But it's like, I know these 3 things. We've tried these 2 things. We did this once. But you really should go talk to Elijah because they know a lot about this.
Yeah.
And so I think like my skill set, I don't feel like, even though I've worked in residence life for 20 years and that's kind of my thing, I don't feel like pigeonholed into one part of it because I've done work in the apartments, first-year student housing, off-campus apartments, COVID housing, And so I like the fact that I'm kind of a utility player and I am honestly not afraid to dig in and do the work where it needs to be done. I have a memory a couple years ago of me and our marketing director. These move-in packets they come alphabetical or something. I can't remember. But it was August right before move-in, and they weren't separated correctly. And her and I had went to pick them up, and we literally sat on the sidewalk outside of BWR and resorted them because the staff at 1:00 was going to stuff the packets for the keys for the students, So, just pitching in and getting it done. I mean,
that would have been a disaster too.
Yes.
Keys going in random packets. That would have not been good.
Yeah. So kind of a utility player, someone who works hard, someone who's going to get in and get it done, whether it's in my lane of work or not. At the end of the day, if it has to be done, let's do it.
That's really awesome to hear because I was going to ask, what are some of the aspects that your experience has helped you with working with residents? So in 20 years, in 20 plus years, what are some of the things that, you've learned? What are some of the lessons or skills that you've really honed in on? But it seems like kind of experiencing it all has really helped with, I'd say maybe problem solving and just dealing with things. But I guess what are some of the other things that you've learned in 22 years of working with residents?
Again, every day is different. Well, and I think of 3 things when you ask that question. 1, whether it's relationships with students and residents, their families, our customers, my coworkers, external, internal, the communication and the relationships are so important. Really, if you have that, you can get the work done. But the other piece of it, Elijah, and I think it's part of what keeps me going too, is our university students, they just amaze me. When people interview and they say, why have you stayed at Iowa State so long, Susan? It's our student body, I mean, it's things like this. I didn't even know you could come to the Student Innovation Center and do a podcast. So I've learned something from you, or a student will sit down with me and maybe they're sitting down with me for not a good reason. They have a conduct hearing and I'll start to ask them a little bit about themselves and they'll tell me about a class they're taking. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know Iowa State offered that. Tell me more about that, And the students kind of look at me like, okay, I'm here for a quiet hours. And so that's part of what I love about being at Iowa State and in the Ames community is just our students. I love walking through our residence hall buildings and seeing what they're up to, what they've come up with. The programming that our resident assistant staff, like you and all the other RAs do, is so creative. It's so creative in terms of how they connect people and build community. So those are,
those are some of the things that you like. Yeah. And that's something that I've noticed, and it's hard for me to speak to, but you might have a better grasp on it. But the change from going to high school to college and here's this small community setting to here's this big community setting, everything is crazy to me, and it's it's hard to imagine other colleges doing it, but I imagine that they do. But I don't know what really sets Iowa State apart from other colleges when it comes to the student body. Do you kind of have a good grasp on that, or?
Well, one thing that definitely sets us apart that I think is really unique, especially when it comes to students and residents, is that we have the house system. I mean, that's something that started at Iowa State. So for folks that aren't familiar with Iowa State, our floors in our residence halls, rather than saying, I live on 8th floor Larch or 2nd floor Larch or 2nd floor Oak, they're all named after different people who have had an impact on the institution. And so immediately when our students come to campus, they're able to wrap their hands around that as a community. So it's not just, I live on 2nd floor Oak. It's like, I live on Fosmark House. And the thing that carries that, whether students live with us for 1-2 years, that first year is so transformative. You know, you meet some of these people that literally are going to be your friends for life, which is one of the things I love about residents too. And so we have alumni that come knocking on our door that say, my friends and I lived in Oak in the 80s, and we're having a reunion on campus. We want to come back and see Fosmark House. Not 2nd floor Oak, Fosmark House.
Yeah.
And that's the floor I lived on as an RA, so that's why I keep using
And you remember it too.
I do,
yeah.
exactly. It's the one I remember best.
Yeah.
And so I think that is so unique to Iowa State that immediately you wrap your arms around that and you feel part of a community, you feel connected, which I think is really important for students persisting and being able to stay at the institution, whether they choose to stay on campus or not. It's that like instant connection. So I think that house system is something I love, and I think something that makes Iowa State stand out.
Well, I
think
it's really cool too, because on the outsides of the buildings you have these like murals and these signs painted, and every single one is different, and they'll have the names. So it's like everyone kind of knows a lot of the houses because they've seen them on the outside, but just like, hey, this is my house.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like that home team advantage. Everyone has kind of like a team that they're living on. Because I remember the houses that I lived on too.
See?
So, and it wasn't even for that long. And we didn't even have like a good floor relationship with the people, but I still remember the houses that I'm on because it's just interesting.
You feel connected to it.
Yeah.
And you're going to come back as an alumni someday with your family or whoever, and you're going to be like, there it is.
Yeah,
you know?
There's Franklin right there.
Yeah. Exactly. So
that's really cool. I haven't heard people talk about the house system very often. So it's cool to find an appreciation from that.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that. I mean, I had nothing to do with that. Yeah. Nothing. It was here when I got
that you
here.
Appreciate.
But I think it is a very cool part of our history.
Yeah. So, with working in residence life, are there any things you've learned about working with residents specifically, like kind of more psychological thing or just people-oriented things that are kind of like, ooh, I didn't really understand this about students until I started working here. Like, are there any tips or tricks when it comes to dealing with students or talking with them that you've learned throughout the years?
Wow, that's a really good question, Elijah. And I'm thinking, I have like worked with students now for 20 years, and what have I learned? One, that, every student is different. And the students that I worked with 20 years ago are so different than the students now because so much has changed in our world with technology, with all of this. When I started as a hall director, we didn't have all the smartphones and all of that going on. So how students receive and give information and all of that has changed. And I think it's really important in any working with students that you got to be willing to change and adapt to that. Like you might be anti-social media and that's fine, but that's where our students live and breathe. And so I'm definitely not hip and not up on it, but I try to know enough. And so I can communicate and talk with students and like be in that world. I also think no matter whether it was 20 years ago or it's now or the future, I think for me, you really have to get to know each person individually. And that's hard sometimes when a student's just in and out of your office in 20 minutes. Fortunately, I get to work with some students like you where I get to build a relationship over a semester or a year. But sometimes students that live in the building that are just coming in and out, it might be quick. But I think seeing that person where they're at, that you're interested in something beyond just the problem that they're presenting with. Again, it's about building that relationship. And I think for me, that's what's been really, successful. And then in times when I can, like when I'm not being a hall director, my current job is like one more step removed from students. But when I can, and whatever the situation is, too, trying to circle back later to say, we connected 3 months ago and I haven't heard from you, but I do hope everything's still going well and that kind of thing. I think is really important. And to remember, students just have a lot going on in their lives, we're fortunate to have a campus where students are so involved, which is, awesome, over 600 student organizations and that kind of thing. But beyond that, too, everyone just has personal stuff. Sometimes the world can be a difficult place. And so I guess just a lot of listening and trying to have a lot of patience, for sure. Yeah.
So you're working to like build these relationships with students. Is that something that's kind of pressed by the Department of Residence, or is that something that you kind of like developed? Like, do you think other DOR staff kind of has that in the back of their mind too, or is that something that you do?
No, I think it's something that all of us do this work. I mean, I think it would be hard to be in this work and to enjoy the work if you weren't interested in engaging and being with students, particularly in residence life, because for especially our live-in staff, you live where you work and you're surrounded and you're amongst them. So no, I think it's something that our staff as a whole has an interest in, connecting, wanting students to be successful, wanting students to do well. And really, again, going back to what I said earlier, like wanting them to feel comfortable in their cyclone home and feel like this is a good place. And so we can take out some of that, so students can focus on their academics and doing what they're here to do. So yeah. So it's definitely something to learn, and I've felt good connections with past like hall, like Hortensia was my first, and then she would be walking her dog, up and down the building, like just saying hi to people. So like I remember that kind of stuff, and it's nice to know that like they're trying to build that relationship too. It's an awesome motto to have for a job like this.
Right. It is a good perspective. Like you live where you work. Right. Especially for a lot of these people too.
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly. And you do too as a resident assistant. You live where you work,
Yeah. So it's like if my floor is, quiet, it's like I'm building that environment so I can work to kind of make it better for myself almost selfishly. So.
Right. Exactly.
So what would you say, like, the campus's goals? Like, if you were to look at DOR as a whole, what would you say, like, their main focuses are? Like, where are they trying to go? Are there any, like, projects being worked on or any, like, kind of areas that the whole DOR community is working towards?
That's a really good question, Elijah. So we do have, and I can't speak super intelligently about it because it's my facility partner's area, but we do have a 10-year plan that we're continually working on in order to keep our facilities updated and fresh and good for students. So that's everything from like putting a new boiler in a building, which isn't like a pretty thing that anyone sees, but it means you have hot water every day. To new roofs on Friley. We're doing some Friley bathrooms right now. It might be new siding on a Frederickson Court building, So I think that's one thing is just that we're always constantly looking at our facilities. What's the deferred maintenance? What do we need to be upkeeping and changing and all of that, so it's a good place for students to live. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that lower one is about like it's like housing, physical structure, and that kind of thing. So to keep the bones of our structure good, so to speak. So that's one thing that we're continually looking at. And then I think the other thing is, and it's kind of what we alluded to before, but just continually looking at the student body and what do students want. And I think we do a really phenomenal job of listening to students and hearing their input through IRHA, through our community councils and all of that, and just staying, fresh and relevant. Because what we did 20 years ago, what I thought was cool that a student would want, again, might be very different now. I also think, just looking at where we are with enrollment and making sure that we have enough facilities and beds to, house our students that want to live with us, I think. And then the third thing, I guess, is our director of residence is retiring. And so, we'll have a new director of residence come in. And
is it going to be you?
No.
The door's opening. This is that next step for you.
That's okay. Not quite on that step. But, new leadership. So we'll look and see.
Yeah,
where that takes
and
us.
that'll see where it takes us to.
Right.
Yeah, because I think the next big thing is trying to find a way to incorporate technology into like the Department of Residence and everything. Because I think there are a lot of processes that seem kind of old, like with the student org website, but with like the student governments, I feel like there's a lot of online platforming that could be built with like making the communication easier and like getting things approved easier and like all of this stuff. There are steps that could be taken, but even with like advertising, and you had mentioned that we can't use TikTok, but which makes sense. But trying to find a way to use social media to kind of like platform and talk about things, I feel like is in the future with DOR. Do you guys have you guys been talking about trying to include technology into this stuff or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we, our marketing staff would be a great one to have that conversation around. I just noticed, on some social media platform, I don't know if it was Facebook or Instagram, but they're doing like a March Madness bracket on the things that you most need in your room. Like I don't even, I just like scrolled past it the other day. So I think they do a really good job. It's relevant, right? It's like March Madness and here's a bracket of what's going on in your room. They just had the best room on campus contest. So, I think that they are much better than I am in coming up with like these creative ways to do all these things. I mean, we do. I think I'm proud of, and again, I'm not directly involved in it, but one unique thing. Well, I guess I don't know if it's unique to Iowa State or not, but we do make like the whole room change process pretty easy for students, and that's all based on technology. We have a Star Res platform that students can go in through a housing portal. I always tell students the easy part is selecting the new room. The hard part is moving the boxes to the room. And so you don't have to meet with somebody. You don't have to whatever. I mean, we do have it shut down during various times in the year for different maintenance or at the end of the semester, so everyone can just be where they're at. So I think we've done a great job of that because back when I was an RA, it was all like paper, pencil, different colored forms. I look back on all of that now and I'm like, how did we ever?
Yeah, I've been wondering that working at like a desk shift, just doing something as simple as packages. Like I could not imagine not having like a scanner, like having, being able to search up their name. And it's like, if someone didn't put a room number on their package 20 years ago, I mean, how would you even go about like? Well,
and the funny thing is, Elijah, that you bring that up, 20 years ago, we didn't really need that system because there were very few packages. I mean, like when I was an RA or when I was a student here, basically if you got a package, it's because grandma sent you cookies. No Amazon. There was no like DoorDash, like none of that. So it was such a huge deal. And everybody on the floor would know if someone got a package because you would get these like little cardboard squares in your mailbox that we wrote on with dry erase markers. And it was like a paper pencil log. But I mean, we weren't getting that many packages.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah. That like packages is kind of like a mail getting delivered in that capacity. Yeah. Maybe during Christmas, there'd be more packages, but
or the end of the semester, packages. We were slotting a lot more mail because people actually used to send letters.
Yeah, they'd have to communicate with letters. That was a big thing that I was talking about with, I had the president of the psychology club on there. We were talking about how technology has changed and how it'll make like this big, it makes this big stressful environment because you can do everything. So it's kind of like, hey, if you're not productive, it's kind of your fault because you have the opportunity to communicate with anybody at any moment.
Yeah.
So you're constantly pressed to be as productive as possible.
Right.
And it's an interesting concept because like, yeah, if I wanted to get something done in my dorm, I could just email you and then get that response right away, like any time of the day. And so you have this big technological advancement.
Yes.
And it's interesting to think about what the package is and like with just doing a simple job, like working at a desk, how many things would be harder to do? Like if I lent out a broom, like that person could just dip and never return it. We'd have no information on him or anything.
I know. We used to check out VCR tapes at the hall desk.
Oh,
VCR.
wow. Yeah.
Oh, I'm totally dating myself. Totally. All these things we used to have. Oh my gosh.
So how do you think residence life has changed in like broadly, other than the introduction of technology? Like, are there things that have changed? Because for me, it seems like in the movies, the residence halls are just like parties all the time, like constant alcohol, but none of the buildings that I've been have really had issues with that. Is that something that used to be the case and now isn't as much, or like what have you noticed with residence life?
I mean, a lot has changed because students change, so we kind of like talked about some of that, about, how students change over time and that changes things. But I think the introduction of technology is obviously the biggest thing, because how we communicate and interact and all of that kind of thing. But Elijah, I think, obviously you can't say that a lot hasn't changed in 20 years, but I guess the thing I keep thinking about with that question is, fundamentally at the core, we just have great students at Iowa State, and so we have a lot more off-campus apartments and Ames now than we did 20 years ago when I started as a hall director or a grad assistant. And so I honestly think that makes us better, because there's more competition out there now for us to get, students to stay with us. And I think COVID's impacted some of that too. People look at living together a little bit differently now. Maybe I want my own bathroom and, all these things, because we were isolated and, doing whatever during COVID. But I think that makes us better, again, in terms of how we upkeep our facilities, look at our facilities, what kind of bathrooms do students want. We've done some stuff in our apartments where we introduced pet-friendly housing, because students, we used to be no pets way back in the day, and students are like, I really want to bring pets, and so like we incorporate that now. So again, I think it just goes back to, we really try to listen to students and what do you want, and is there a way to incorporate that? And maybe we can't, students are like, oh, we're really interested in this, ABC, and it's like, oh, we can't do all of that, but we can do D and C and a little bit of G, So I think, but again, at the core, like I worked with really great students 20 years ago, and I still get to work with great students, and that's because I'm at Iowa State. Yeah. So, not to be biased.
Do you think there's something that attracts people to Iowa State that maybe other colleges aren't really doing, or is it just that Iowa nice? Like, what do you think is responsible for?
I think students come to campus, and how can you not fall in love with it? We have a beautiful campus. I think that we truly do have an array of, faculty and student services staff and all that kind of thing that really do want students to be successful. I think there's opportunities here, whether it's in residence or in student life or wherever, where this is what I said when I came to Iowa State, and it's still true today. Iowa State's a huge place. Like, we're a big institution, and so like that was honestly kind of overwhelming for me as a student, and I still think about that. But I tell students it's a big place, but you're going to find your spot here, and so you're not going to do all 300 things that might be offered, but you're going to find your 5 things that are you. So like for me, it was obviously residence life. I was really involved in campus ministry at St. Thomas Aquinas. I was involved in the Family and Consumer Sciences Club, and like those were kind of my things. And I think that's true for every single student, and then of course, like whatever's going on in the classroom for them. So I think that's really attractive. It's just the wealth of options, and then knowing that you can pick the 3 or 4 things that are really you, that are gonna not only enhance your experience on campus, but help you with whatever it is you're going to do next. And so I think that's what's, part of really attractive about our institution.
Yeah, and I think that's something that needs to be communicated a little bit more. And I'm going to be a Cyclone aide this summer, and it's kind of one of the things that I'm trying to like push onto students is like, because I think I struggled with kind of like choice overload when I came here, because it was like it's like you kind of said, it's like it's so big, there's so many options, and it's like what you'll end up finding is that you only have the time to do like
Yes.
4 of these things, and then the biggest thing that is, this college is going to be so big, so the things that I do are going to have this huge number of people doing it. But that's not really the case for a lot of the things that I was interested in.
Yeah.
Like I did theater, and I was expecting like, oh, I'm going to go in here and there's a bunch of kids who are going to be like the most amazing actors you've ever seen. I'm going to be competing with like hundreds of students, but you just go there and you're like, not the case. Like these kids are kind of like me. Like they just like doing it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with a lot of other things that I'm doing. And so it's like telling students, hey, it's going to be overwhelming when you get here to do these things, but you really are going to find that group and everyone's just like you.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, with a lot of student leaders, that is a conversation I end up having though, because it's like some students come in and they do the 300 things. And then it's like, okay, and where's the time to study? And you got a midterm and
Yeah.
so like having those conversations too, it's like, you gotta like, you want to take advantage of it, but at the same time, you have to like maintain some sanity and have some time for yourself too. So
have fun doing
right.
things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
What I've discovered too is that there are so many options to do things, to pursue hobbies like on your own.
Yes.
So like this
Yeah.
podcast is a really good example. Like this isn't a club. This is just me doing it.
Yeah.
And they give me this big awesome studio to do it in.
Yeah.
And upstairs like they have the 3D printing lab if you just
Right.
want to like create things or like
Yeah.
they have a bunch of different options that are just like.
This building is amazing. There's like so much more. I remember touring it when it first opened, and there's like so much more I want to explore. Like, isn't there like a chocolate lab or something upstairs?
I think they do food here.
I know.
And they have the glass blowing
Yes.
right above us, so at any point molten metal could just melt through the floor on top of us. But
See, Elijah, it
beyond
makes me
that.
want to come back and be a student. Like these things that weren't available when I was here.
Oh yeah, and we're made so much more aware of it too.
Yeah.
Because of like the tours and technology
Right,
and
exactly.
like you just know it's here.
You used to have to like rely on a flyer on the wall, and now it's like you can get it through your phone and
Yeah.
a text message from a friend
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of that stuff.
Well, because I was always curious because you and I they have chalkboard. Not chalkboard, chalk on the sidewalk.
Oh.
And that's how they advertise. Like, I mean, every sidewalk has like, 1,000 different messages. They don't really put up flyers.
Yeah.
They just do sidewalk thing. And
Okay.
I was expecting that to be here, but it's
Yeah.
not really as big of a thing here.
Thing. I mean, sometimes I see sidewalk chalk, but yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know. if
Yeah,
it's-
I'd always,
Yeah.
I might advertise for this podcast on the sidewalk or something. I just don't want to break any rules.
right.
That's the biggest thing.
Might be good to check with our friends in facility planning and management or
and
campus
see-
work. They
and
could
see
tell
if
you.
they know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh no, I think ISU is great. What are some other things that you really appreciate about ISU? Because I think it's criminally underrated to talk about the good things about ISU. Like I think a lot of people see, and this might be a controversial take, but I'd pay more to go here.
You should go tell that to the registrar's office or whoever collects it. Yeah.
Don't let that go anywhere. But like for me, with even SciRide, janitorial staff, living staff, food staff, I mean, the amount of different options that it's physically impossible for me to be able to use all of these options.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like a fair price to pay a ton of money to go here.
Yeah.
Because I really could do anything.
Right.
Like next year, I could be a whole new person with a bunch of whole new interests, and I could do that 10 more times.
Right.
And I would still have all the things that I wanted to do.
Right. Wow, Elijah, that's a really great, positive way of looking at it. Well, when you asked that question, the first thing that came to mind is both of our basketball teams are in the NCAA tournament.
Yes, you're a big basketball
so
fan.
I'm excited about that. I'm a season ticket holder to the women, and so it's been super fun to watch them play and win the Big 12 championship this weekend. So there's a reason we have got some great sports teams. I think I kind of feel like I sound like a broken record, but I keep coming back to, I just think we have such great people here. If I was talking to a prospective student, again, whether it's in residence or somewhere else on campus, I truly believe, I know for me and my colleagues and others, like I want students to succeed here, and I think that's like really important in college choice is finding a place where people truly want you to do well and persist to graduation. Because to your point, Elijah, it shouldn't be just about collecting like the money, like the tuition and all of that. And, maybe there's a reason I don't work in accounting or something. But, I think me and my colleagues want students to do well and be successful and find, college should be a holistic experience, like the academic piece is important, but it's kind of what you just spoke to. Where are you going to find these outside outlets to have other personal fulfillment, to get the experiences that are going to give you what you need to get that first job? And I think on top of having a beautiful campus, we have those options and opportunities here. And kind of as we've spoken about, they keep changing too, like however many years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was, we didn't, as far as I know, we didn't have a student innovation center with, a podcast room and a glass blowing room and that kind of thing. So I have seen in 20 years, Iowa State continues to grow and evolve and add new things, whether it's to keep up with the technology or the student needs or whatever. And so I do not believe we're like a stagnant campus, because what we're able to offer now is different than, what we offered in the past. So.
It's so crazy to think about because on paper, ISU seems like it wouldn't be like that because it's like this big school with a really high acceptance rate, like takes in a ton of people, like just small town Iowa, a school that's, really big. You wouldn't think that the message would be like, we want you to succeed.
Yeah.
It would be like, come get your education, give us money, get out. And it's like kind of like cheaper, get more people and then pump them out. But what I'm discovering here is that like they've kind of invested that money into like they did not need to make this. This college would be probably equally successful if this whole building didn't exist. But they just like, let's just throw it together and put all of the cool things here. And then just for all those like niche, like I don't know how many students are using this room, but it's probably not that many.
Yeah.
So, and this room is probably super expensive. And it's like they did that just for those people. And it's a cool concept.
Maybe it's a best kept secret, but now the secret's going to be out of it.
I was gonna say.
Booking for your next podcast.
Maybe I shouldn't be advertising how cool this room is. Maybe I should keep it on this room's awful, guys. Don't. God, I'm constantly working against staff and just, oh man. Just before this, we were complimenting the staff team here.
Maybe you want to say something different.
I was saying she might go in there and hit pause on the recording and not tell me. No, I'm a big ISU fan, and I
well, that'll make you a great Cyclone 8 this summer. You'll be awesome this summer.
Yeah, I think my first year it was kind of like, well, I'm going to college and I'm enjoying it, and I know other people are having a good time. But then I think it was really when I became an RA and then started doing Cyclone 8 stuff and then started doing this podcast. It was kind of like, wow, this is like a fraction of what is going on here.
Yeah.
And so it's really awesome to be a part of all this like new student program stuff. So how have you felt being involved in like DOR has affected your like personal life and like your mental health and just like how has it made you the person that you are?
Wow, that's a good question too, Elijah. You have a lot of them. The thing is that I say this a lot when people, ask me about residence or whatever. It truly is a privilege to work with students in their most vulnerable place, their home. So I have gotten the privilege to work with students at their very, very, very best and seeing them on graduation day and celebrating with families and all of that. And unfortunately, I've also seen students at some of their lowest moments too. And then there's lots in between, right? And so like some of those days are hard when you see students struggling or you see a community struggling. I serve on an after hours duty rotation. And so sometimes you get calls in the middle of the night and it's not always great stuff, So, sometimes that can be hard. But I think going back to, and you work through that, and fortunately, like I have colleagues that I can process with. I Make sure I do things for my own personal health to unplug and be away from it. And when I'm with my family, I'm with my family. Or, I've got a great group of girlfriends that we travel together and do all of those things. So, I've got my own personal ways to, not work 24/7, because that's not healthy for anyone, obviously. But the point I was trying to get to is, even when you work with students in those really hard moments, like, you feel like, thank goodness I'm here. I am proud to be part of a staff and in a profession that has dedicated themselves to, we're going to help students through some of these hard things and celebrate with them with the really good things too. But, again, if you talk to a lot of people in residence life who work on a college campus, again, none of us, when I was 10 years old, thought, oh, I'm going to go work in a college for the rest of my life. You didn't even know that these jobs and whatever existed, And so for me, that's what I try to come back to, is how are we helping students? And that makes me feel like fulfilled. So even in the hard moments, like, you got to work through them and all of that stuff. But then at the end of the day or the next day or whatever, you're like, oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness that we were there. And it might be something so minor, Elijah. It might be a 5-minute conversation or giving a 2-minute direction. But it's like, we've got good people here that, again, want to help those students persist and, succeed. So, and then at the end of the day, I try to go home and, unplug and binge TV watch and all those other things that everybody else does.
Your book club. And,
yes, my book club and my friends and
Well, I actually was curious about more of, like, personal getting to know Susan.
Yeah.
So you had said that this year you had a resolution to do 5 new things, and this podcast would be one. Do you have any ideas for the other ones?
Okay, so one thing that I am trying to pay more attention to. So again, back to the technology. I get a lot of email in my day, and you get, like, a lot of junk email that you, like, delete or whatever. But I am trying to pay more attention to some things that come across to my email that might be advertising, like, a lecture on campus that I normally would have been like, oh, I don't have time for that or whatever. So I want to try to go to some more, like, campus lectures this semester. And then I don't know if folks know this or not, but, like, we have 2 great museums on campus, or 3, if I can. I won't even say how many, because I'll get it wrong, because, again, that's not my area of campus. But, like, the Farmhouse Museum, there's an art museum in Sheeman, and then there's the one in Morrill Hall. So I've been trying to pay attention to what exhibits are there and go. Because I just think that, again, to our earlier point, there's so much happening on campus, and sometimes I get so busy in my day-to-day. But, to take an hour out, take my lunch as an example, and meet up with a friend and go look at the art exhibit in Morrill Hall, like, that's a great way for your mental health, just to unplug for an hour and do that with a friend and grab lunch and whatever. And we have lots of opportunities on campus that, you can take advantage of those kinds of things. So those are some things that I'm
on the list that you're looking at.
Yeah. So, they're not big things, Elijah. Like, 5 new things. Like, I'm not skydiving. Yeah. I'll tell you that. Like, I'm not skydiving.
I would have loved to hear about your skydiving adventure.
I know. No, definitely not skydiving. In February, a friend and I went to Kansas City, and I saw Winona Judd in concert for the first time. That was something new. And we were able to tour, Elijah knows this, but, like, I'm a big coffee lover. I've got to have my coffee. We were able to tour the roastery in Kansas City, which the roastery's owner is an alum, and we have roastery coffee on campus. So went down there and toured and bought some coffee. So that was something new. So anyways.
Well, maybe not as new to you as a coffee,
maybe not.
coffee extraordinaire.
Yeah, but. Maybe not. So anyways, it's little things. It's not
going to be a big thing.
Right.
Oh, okay, because I was going to suggest a big thing. Not really a big thing, but one of the, do you play any instruments, or are you very musical at all?
No. I played the trumpet and baritone in high school.
Okay.
Mostly because my brother was in band, and I was like, oh, that's the thing to do. My brother was a great trombonist in high school. I was not so good, and I quit my freshman year.
Oh, okay.
I don't think the band director was very happy with me at the time. So no instruments, no piano. I sing pretty quietly, only loud in my car alone because I really can't carry a tune. Just being honest with you.
Yeah, no, people just need, like, they need to understand themselves, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I totally get that.
Yeah.
Because I would suggest maybe, like, trying to learn something small, like,
it's a
on an
great idea.
instrument, because it's the most humbling thing, but also, like, the best obstacle to overcome, because you will be the worst player in existence until you get it, and then you're like, this is, like, the coolest thing I've ever learned how to do.
Yeah.
So I was going to suggest that, or maybe try to write something, like, if you have, like, a story you want to get out, or, like, maybe just, you know, try to write a 10-page story or something, something kind of big. Just,
Elijah.
you know, something like, hey, I want to see how creative I am these days, and just try to write something.
That's a really great idea. I hadn't even thought of anything.
Yeah, write something for your book club, and
then get them to read it.
Yeah, get them to read it and discuss it.
They would be up for it. They're a good group. They would totally be up for it.
No, I like writing. I like music. So I try to suggest people, like, hey, just try it out. Like, the fun of it is sucking at it and then getting better like when you're done. Like, it's the first stage to being good at something is being horrible at it.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. You have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah,
like all of us with whatever we do, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. No, I definitely suggest doing that, especially if you already have the want to try new things.
Yeah.
So you're a very family-oriented person, it seems like. And you said you had 25 cousins?
On my dad's side, I'm the youngest of 25 on my dad was one of 7. And so out of that 7 siblings, there was 25 of us. Yeah.
Wow.
25 of us.
Wow. Yep. So you grew up, wow. So then did they all live in like the same area, and so you get a lot of big family reunions and like get-togethers?
So a lot, pretty much everybody was in Iowa, minus one of my dad's brothers moved out to California. So we know those cousins, but we obviously didn't get to know them as well. But otherwise, all pretty much in Iowa. Most of them in eastern Iowa. And so we started. I was born in Des Moines. My parents lived in Ankeny, and then we moved to Cedar Rapids, and so we were really close then, because we were only like an hour away from most of them. And then we moved to Minnesota, and that wasn't bad. That was like 4 hours. But the really cool thing is my dad and his 7 siblings, like sometimes when you get that many siblings, not everybody will be close. But my dad's siblings really were his best friends. And so social events in our family, or social for my dad, and don't get me wrong, he had other friends through work and whatever, but really revolved around going to visit his siblings, because those were his best buddies. Like him and, his brothers fished, and he fished with his nephews and all of that. And so then, fortunately, like with my brother and I, then we had friends too, because there were cousins around our age. And so for us, with that many, it was never like, you could say family reunion, but like, it could be just like that once a month. Yeah, exactly, Elijah. Yeah, it was just like hanging out with our buddies. And we happen to be related to them. But so we were just really fortunate that was part of my upbringing. And, we're all adults now, and most of them are in Iowa. I mean, some of them are other places, but, we still have a relationship where, I could pick up the phone or text them and they would do anything for me. And, it's like picking up right where you left off.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Well, that's so awesome. So is that kind of what you spend, like do you spend a lot of time, like, hanging out with your family, like communicating with your family? Like, is family something that you're still trying to like? Yeah,
absolutely. Like one of the most important things in my life, right? So my mom lives in eastern Iowa, and I go try to visit her every 2-3 weeks. 3-4 weeks, whatever the schedule allows. And then my older brother, who I mentioned, is the reason I'm at Iowa State, because he came here. He lives in Houston, Texas, and is married to my lovely sister-in-law, and they have 2 boys, my nephews. So unfortunately, they're a little bit further away. But again, because of technology, the FaceTiming, the text, the emails, like all of that. Yeah, my family is like for sure my go-to, and helps me remember they keep me centered and they help me remember what's important in life. And they're really where I can have my downtime.
Yeah.
So
that's really awesome, because I think that's, you talk about like going to your mom's and hanging out with your mom a lot.
Yep,
And it's really wholesome to, that family is such like a center,
Yes.
focal point of this. So is it like, is it, you spend a lot of time doing family stuff, and then is like work and like your career like a big part of what you spend time doing as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. So there's work in my career, there's my family, and then I've got a really, really strong group of friends. And so I would say like those things are probably what I spend most of my time in. I mean, I have downtime and all of that, but I guess in terms of priorities, yeah, those
Like those are the main ones.
Right.
Yeah, I do. I'd really like asking that. I'm gonna try to ask that to more people to see like, hey, like, what do you spend your time? Like, where would you prioritize like friends, family, like religion, relationship, like that whole thing, and like see like, hey, where do you put these kinds of things?
Yes,
And
that's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
Because you learn a lot about people, like when you ask that.
And it's different to. There's not a right answer.
Right.
It's like everyone's is completely different. And so it's like mine, just hearing someone's that's different than mine, it's like, that's really cool to like understand that. So
it says a lot about a person, like how they spend their time and where they spend it.
And if they know how they spend their time too. Some people be like, oh geez, I have no idea.
That's true.
It's like that's a good indicator too, where it's like
maybe something I should think about.
TV mostly. So some people are, it's just how it is, and there's still no wrong answer. But it's interesting to know about that.
It is.
I think that's all. I think that's about all I have for you. And we've been going for about an hour.
That's like, that went fast.
I tell people it's the fastest hour of your life.
It totally is.
Like you think I'll tell you like, oh, we'll try to go to like 45 minutes to like an hour and 15, and then I'll tell people down and be like, it's like, no, don't worry about it. That's going to be the fastest hour of your life.
Oh my gosh, it was really fast.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got anything interesting out of any of that.
Oh, no, I thought it was super interesting. It wouldn't have lasted an hour if it wasn't interesting.
Make me feel good this morning.
No, I wouldn't have had you on if I wasn't interested in residence life.
Good. Well, it has given me a lot. It really has, for sure.
Well, I think I'm in a stage of my life where I'm just interested in trying to put myself in someone else's shoes and be like, okay, how did you get here? Like, what do you do? Like getting through all that. So it's always going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Well, and keep asking people those questions, Elijah, because everyone gets to their path and journey, differently. It's never going to look the same way for everybody, and everyone's journey, their journey is meant for them, and so I think those are great questions to keep asking people, because you'll learn a ton.
Yeah, and I think people don't get the opportunity to talk about like their journey that often. So I love giving that to people, like, hey, tell me about you.
Right. Right. I mean? So keep doing that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Is there any advertisements you want to do? Any like things you want to talk about before we sign off?
I am really grateful that you thought enough that I would have enough interesting things to say, and I appreciate all of your questions about residence life. Like, I really do think that we do good work and we want to help students. And so, for people who are living in residence and whatever, like, reach out to your hall director, your RA, whether it is about something in housing or I don't know where to go on campus to get this. That's what we're here for. That's what we live for. That's what we do. And so, yeah. Yeah,
I can absolutely attest to that. Your RAs are really excited to answer your questions.
Yes.
So make sure you ask them, guys.
Yeah. I mean, people get into it because they want to help people, So if you need something, give us the opportunity to help. Absolutely,
yeah, let
Elijah.
us help, please.
That's a great note to end on, right?
Yeah. Well, it's awesome having you on, Susan.
Thanks, Elijah. I appreciate it.